Let's talk about the VRS. That's the Valve ranking system. Right now, it's very vogue to talk about it because obviously there have been a number of incidents, I guess is a word, where people have started pointing to the VRS system and saying basically, oh, look, it's fucked, it's broken, it's a mess. And a lot of people have been very negative about it right now. Now, look, obviously, those people definitely, unequivocally, inarguably have a point. I'm not saying that they don't. But there's also this kind of reflexive knee-jerk reaction that people have a tendency to fall into. And because it's Valve doing it, what's happened is it's essentially become an extension of the critique that people level at Valve over the development of CS2. So people are going, Valve don't care, Valve don't pay attention, Valve made a bad algorithm, Valve sucked, and now the whole circuit's going to come tumbling down. And it's like, guys, they're more dialed in to the esports side of the game than they ever have been. This is the most involved they've ever been. This is the most interested they've ever been. And the VRS was always going to take time to get right. It's a completely new idea. It's like the WCS that essentially that used to have Activision Blizzard used to have in StarCraft 2, and it's got a lot of moving parts. And I get it. Some of these things have been badly handled, but ultimately, I do believe it takes us to a better place than where we've just come from, which was the partnered league system. Teams just getting invited if they've got millions in the bank. That doesn't really seem like a particularly great system for a tournament and to run, especially in esports. You see, that can maybe work in a closed-off sport where it's like, you know, there's only X amount of teams. But theoretically, any 5 players that have the game installed can get together, make a team, get good, and win things. And they're going to need access to the tournaments to win those things. But they don't have millions in the banks. They're not backed by an MGO. So what do? And so to solve that problem, merit has to be the denominator. And I've seen so many people going, oh, VRS is going to, you know, kill the scene, and it's really tough on the tier 2 teams. Listen, you've got non-VRS tournaments that you can enter, and you can just flourish in those tournaments. You might never play at a big one, but there's enough money in tier 2, especially with all the match fixing you cunts do, to make a great living. And so I don't want to hear about that. We'll talk a little bit about that on the runoff of this. But tier 2's in a much better place than it has been for a while. Are the matches all fixed? Yeah. Is it all backed by betting sponsors? Yeah. Is that great? No. But, you know, it's fine. It's like, there you go. You've got your tier 2. Right. Let's start then. Where to begin? Tell you what we'll do. Vu made a 10-minute video. And what I'm going to do is, I'll play a clip of the Vu video, because I'm going to say some of the same things he says. And so, you know, obviously, I don't just want to leech his content and turn into Hassan and just sit here eating fucking ramen while Vu talks. So let's do it. Also, congratulations on your analysis desk appearance.
Starting this year, Valve introduced the VRS system that all major events are going to have to be using if they want to actually be part of the ecosystem, and it's caused a lot of problems. Now, the VRS system itself is extremely complicated because to get out your rank, you have bounty offered, bounty collected, opponent network, and LAN wins, and then they average these all out. Is an insane factor, okay? I'll explain it as we go, but the problem is it's already causing a lot of issues. You've already had Endpoint close their system, close their team, because, and I quote, the VRS system means that when starting from a low ranking, the struggle to improve that ranking is compounded by the fact that any VRS eligible events are invite only. So looking at the rule, if you have a 24 team event, that means 8 of those teams can be invited to the main event and 16 have to go into the closed qualifier. But then for the open qualifier, here's the rule. Licensee may supplement these invited rosters with open qualifiers at their discretion. So if we look at IEM Katowice, the most recent Tier 1 event, the teams that they invited actually to the event, a lot of them come through the play-in, some of them come through the Valve ranking and the wildcard system, cool. Then you go to the play-in. These are all from the Valve ranking. None of these are open qualifiers. In fact, the tournaments that seem to be running open qualifiers are just the Tier 2 tournaments. So what you have to do is you have to go through a bunch of qualifiers to get into a tier 2 event, win it, and then you can maybe get invited if the TOs like you. This is all super complicated, but my understanding is like these events, they're not forced to run an open qualifier for IM Katowice. They actually don't have to, and so they didn't. So how are you even supposed to be getting VRS ranking?
Right, we'll leave it there. Now, I'm not disagreeing with what Vu's saying, and ultimately as well, I think it is kind of fucked up that you need like basically some sort of PhD in astrophysics to understand the fucking mechanisms through which you will qualify to tournaments. There should just be a much simpler way. I understand that it's all transparent, it's all available, and it is an algorithm and the data goes in and then it spits out the ranking, but ultimately, I think it should just be a bit more simplified, you know? Like, for example, you understood, back when everyone went off the HLTV ranking, you understood the HLTV ranking. You could sit down and accurately predict where people were going to jump up to based on how they did at a tournament. And you can go, oh, wow, they finished top 4, so they're going to be the number 1 team in the world. They've done it. And that was it. And we knew. And everybody just went off the HLTV thing. That's how invites were done. That was how team rankings were assessed. Was it a perfect system? No. No system's gonna be. Ultimately, it before HLTV essentially codified what a world rank looked like, it was just opinion based. I mean, I used to run a world ranking back in the Counter-Strike Source days. Cadred was the official place that you went to for the world ranking. It was the biggest deal. It was sponsored by Alienware. It dictated invites for all the tournaments. So I was aware of how important that ranking was. You want to know how we did it? We had 12 people. I was one of them. So me and 11 other people, and you had to rank your top 10 in your opinion, 1 to 10, and then you sent it in, and then the 10th team got 1 point, all the way up to the top team getting 10 points, and then I aggregated the score of everyone and gave them a score out of 120. Right? That's how we did it. And that was our official Alienware-sponsored world ranking. And what that did was sometimes the people we had on the panel, they wouldn't like a certain team. I'm not putting you in the top 10. Or they would be like, oh, wait, if I put them 5th instead of 3rd, based on if the last month it's similar, they might go down to this ranking, and then this team I like might leapfrog them and go into the top 3 and things like that. So yeah, was there fuckery? Of course, we just deemed that 12 people but would cancel out all of the biases and the bullshit. And obviously, towards the end of Source, it was just academic because it was Very Games. The answer was, who's the best team in the world? Very Games, every time, for about 3 years. So, easily solved. Anyway, the world ranking that we had in HLTV was mathematical based. It was algorithmically based, and by and large, in my opinion, it threw out the right rankings more often than not. You could make arguments about 2nd and 3rd or 4th and 5th. And by the way, anything after 20 is a crapshoot. Who gives a fuck? Certainly after 30, who cares? You know, and that's that. But what's ended up happening with Valve's is they've created this ridiculously complicated system in and of itself. And bizarrely, in it, one of the things that has become a metric is the prize money. The more prize money you win is a factor in how highly ranked you are. But we all know, as esports aficionados, that prize money, like Mongols won Yala Compass, that everyone pretended was an S-tier tournament for a week. And it wasn't an S-tier tournament, and they beat nobody, but that prize money was fucking big, because that's the gimmick that Yala Compass are going for. It's another fucking petroleum dollar fucking based sports washing exercise. So if we have more tournaments like that, let's say hypothetically our scene was increasingly being taken over by a collection of oil barons, right? Which I know that would never happen, obviously. But then they can inflate prize money as and when they want. And therefore, the more prize money you had, and let's also imagine a world where certain teams were only going to attend certain events, and we were inflating the prize money And then, therefore, when they were winning that prize money, they were going to, therefore, get more VRS points, which would encourage them to be invited to more of our events. You could see how, in a conflict of interest world, which, again, we never have conflict of interest in esports, so it's irrelevant, but just theoretically, you could see how you could create a perpetuating cycle of the haves and the have-nots just on the prize money thing alone. So the first thing you would have to do is get rid of that. That seems to be a metric that absolutely has no place. But the bigger problem seems to just be the way that the timing and the method in which it's all calculated. Now, Messioso, who we've had on the Four Horsemen before, we might have to get him on again for this and do a discussion on the VRS. But just for a bit of background, even though he's the GM of Complexity and has been there a while now, he has been a coach for a long time. But also before that, he cut his teeth as a tournament admin. He used to work for ESL. He was the head admin over there. So he's got a great head for this type of stuff. I also think he's got some sort of maths thing going on with his brain, because he notices shit super fucking quick. And he's been one of the people that you should absolutely follow if you want to learn more about what's going on with the VRS, because he doesn't give a fuck. Obviously, Jason Lake doesn't give a fuck that he's tweeting about this. He's just going to say, VRS is broken, it's fucked. So, follow him. But anyway, this was his tweet. There is a pretty major flaw in the way Valve, and therefore HLTV, because remember as well, HLTV are curating this. I don't think it's their fault. They have to use the algorithm Valve tell them to. But I imagine there is some sort of collaboration there. There's a pretty major flaw in the way Valve and HLTV are calculating the VRS with regards to ongoing events. In today's case, Katowice, which has been going on for months, but since today is a major invite cutoff, it's more relevant than ever. On a very basic level, teams who are knocked out of an ongoing tournament, like Katowice, have the full value of prize money of attending counting towards their rankings as of the 3rd of February. Teams who are not eliminated do not. This, in theory, could lead to teams overtaking others due to being eliminated and gaining the full value of the event versus teams who are still in the tournament who haven't gained that value. So, just to explain it in layman's terms, right? If you go out here, if you're one of these teams, like Furia and Mouse, you've only made 10 grand because you went out the tournament and you are shit, right? You've gone out early and you've made a little bit of money. But if you're still in the tournament, i.e. you are not shit, you've made 0. And you will notice 0 is less than $10,000. And so these teams get the $10,000 bump in the VRS ranking points, while the teams that might eventually win and get $400,000 don't. They count as 0 because of an arbitrary cutoff point. And this is another thing that should have just been a little bit of basic foresight, and you would have seen this. A little bit of basic foresight, and you would have gone, oh, well, the invite cutoffs now have to be based around the finishing dates of tournaments, because otherwise teams are going to get negatively impacted for success. You're going to penalize the teams that do better in the tournament before the major cutoff point. And look, just in general, because not all tournaments are equal. We know that on the circuit. So all the invite cutoff dates are super relevant, because if you're in a tournament at the time there's an invite cutoff date and you really want to go to that tournament, it's a Cologne, it's a prestige one, you might not get to go based on winning the previous tournament. So the other option is you assign an arbitrary amount that they could win. So if they're still in the tournament, you give them the minimum and you add that on, which it's not an elegant solution because ultimately they could win more. So your ranking system wouldn't be accurate, but at least then they would likely finish above the teams that went out of the tournament. That doesn't really work, but it's better than what we've got, and it's bad. So that tells you how bad this is, that this is a thing that can happen. But ultimately, what we need is, baked into any circuit with hard set dates, there has to be hard set dates for the update to the ranking. And the best thing to do moving forward is have those updates at the end of every tournament. Simple as that. At the end of the tournament, VRS updates. If there's an important invite date coming, we have an update. And we just have to update more based on as current as we can get the data. It's the only way to keep it fair and make the ranking mean something. And you might go, oh, but Richard, again, surely nothing can actually happen to these teams. Well, as you saw in the VU video, it did. We've got here, this is GamerLegion. Now, everyone loves GamerLegion at the moment. When I say gamer, you say Legion, gamer, right? We all love GamerLegion around here. GamerLegion have been a staple of this stream. And they've done great work. They've built 2 teams that have been relevant in Tier 1 CS with names that, you know, aren't necessarily the best. And they've earned a lot of respect. Everyone loves their coach, Ash. And so this is what they said. Dear Counter-Strike community, we have identified what appears to be a calculation discrepancy in the February Valve ranking update, specifically involving prize pool calculations and minimum prize pool guaranteed for teams still in competition, intended to balance out prize pools for teams that have already been eliminated. This issue has significantly impacted our standing and eligibility for recent invites, as we missed the top 12 placement in the global VRS that we believe we rightfully deserved. As a team committed to performance excellence and sporting fairness, we've reached out to Valve and believe it is crucial to clarify this situation for the benefit of the entire competitive community. Moreover, this could similarly affect other teams in the future, making it all the more important for Valve to address it promptly. Our intention is not to undermine any other team. Rather, we seek transparency and consistency in order to preserve the spirit of fair competition. We fully respect all verdicts and trust that Valve will address this matter appropriately. We appreciate the continued support from our fans and peers and remain dedicated to upholding the highest standards of professionalism within the esports landscape. And yeah, it sucks. It sucks more for a team like GamerLegion than it does for a bigger team, because obviously the bigger team has got legacy points of doing well, and so they're likely to just snowball it and get invited anyway. If you're GamerLegion and you're on the cusp, being in that top 12 is a really fucking big deal. And just to show you where we're at with the ranking as of today, I mean, it's kind of crazy because, you know, you've got Mongols up to 2nd in the world. I mean, that immediately tells me there's something wrong with the algorithm, boys. Like, it's simple. I look, yeah, that's Falcons at 8th. I mean, that's almost more egregious, isn't it? I take one look at that, and I know it's wrong. Like, you just have to care about the game, and you know that's wrong. Now, I understand the way that the VRS points is calculated, and this is another thing that, unfortunately, is going to be up for abuse. The reason Falcons, for example, are 8th is they just got Heroic, and they got Heroic's rank because they got the Heroic core. And so that just transfers over, even though we know the just negative pull of fucking Sonic, I Am the Bag, and all the bullshit with Falcons, and the fact they're a new lineup and therefore have proved absolutely nothing, that means that they're nowhere near the top 10. But I understand there's not really an elegant solution for that. But anyway, that's the current Valve ranking, and it's fucked up. It's fucked up. Needs to be tweaked. There's more. There was some complaints about how it's affecting Tier 2 and the haves and the have-nots. I saw this. I'm going to be controversial here, so I'm going to be a little edgy boy in a moment, but here it is, end point. Today we are placing our Counter-Strike division on hold with immediate effect. And in case you don't know, this includes some of the boys that have been in the No Majors Club. Good homies. Mighty Max, Surreal, the last standing Dutch player, Crucial. They put their statement out explaining why they were putting it on hold. They said with a heavy heart. Now, by the way, Endpoint essentially is their CS division. They kind of like grew out of that. With a heavy heart, we are placing our Counter-Strike division on pause. Our Counter-Strike team has been moved to the bench with immediate effect and available with no buyout. There is no denying that the current iteration of our Counter-Strike department has not been performing as we or the players themselves expect. Alongside this, the landscape of Counter-Strike has changed dramatically. So whilst we still retain the goal of making the major, with our recent form and the changes to the invitation process, that goal is now probably the furthest away that it has ever been. The VRS system means that when starting from a low ranking, the struggle to improve that ranking is compounded by the fact that any VRS-eligible events are invite-only based on the very VRS rank you are trying to improve. This in turn creates a much smaller and internal ecosystem, combining this with a lack of funding and brands willing to get involved in the UK esports scene. That ultimately means that the costs incurred compared to revenue, or potential of, just become too great a risk to the wider company. They then go on and talk about how proud they are and everything they did. But a couple of things. And this is where I'm an edgy boy. So, first of all, this is what Nazgul was talking about. This is what Victor was talking about when he was talking about if a bunch of the big teams don't go to these events, then the invites will be coming further down the trough, and it could indeed be a team like Endpoint that benefit, because you get to go to Cluj. If you do well there, you earn your VRS points, and then you climb the VRS ranking, and you snowball, and in turn, you get more invites to more VRS ranking events, and blah, 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 blah. And if you have sustained success, you will always be invited to VRS events. That's how it works. That is the system working as intended. Now, it might be brutal. It might need something in the algorithm that gives you a boost if it's your first time in a VRS event. Like, maybe you get a little booster that, you know, if you finish well there, you get more points than you would if you'd attended the previous VRS event. I don't know what a solution to that would be. That's something you could do, but I think that's unfair. I think that's anti-meritocratic. The problem is that ultimately, if you can't win, this sounds awful. This is the edgy part. If you can't win, you shouldn't be going to the major. I fucking hate teams that fluked the RMRs and made majors shit. Paris was a disgrace. Teams like Into the Breach in the top 8 is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to the legacy of the tournament. I don't want shit teams fluking a qualifier than being shit at the World Championships. I have always maintained that in an ecosystem that works, sustained success will bring about its rewards. And Endpoint aren't that. They aren't going to achieve excellence in a sustained fashion. So guess what? Yes, you don't get to go to the World Championship. Why? You're not one of the best teams in the world. That's how it works. That's sports. So I know everyone was like, oh man, rats, this VRS team's going to kill Tier 2. No, it's going to kill the Tier 2 teams that have aspirations of Tier 1. Because, as I said, there's CCTs, there's Yalla Compasses, there's Sky Esports. There's all these things that aren't even getting VRS designation, pumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into the Tier 2 ecosystem, by the way. Just go and play those. What's the problem? Oh, that's right. You want a one-time cash injection of sticker money. That's your business model. Well, that business model stinks, guys. It stinks. Into the Breach, by the way, have proven what a poison chalice that can be. Hey, we've made millions. Brilliant. We are set for life. Now, I'm just going to take out a director's loan and that's it. Your org's gone. Your org's gone. You got to build something sustainable. It can't just be the fucking Hail Mary pass of fucking sticker money. It can't be. If the business model is dependent on that, your business model stinks. The end. I'm sorry, Endpoint. I'm sorry that UKCS died in a week, but let's be fucking real. It deserves it. So I don't believe this is a fair critique, but I do think you can tweak the VRS algorithm to maybe do something for teams that are chasing points, attending fewer VRS events than the big guys. There's definitely something you can do there. Valve will think of something outside the box, as they always do. It's moot to even make a suggestion, because they won't follow your suggestion. They follow their suggestion and their ideas. So I don't know what it'll be. I don't even want to predict it, because then they won't do it. Also, Snappy, my old chum, my old Danish chum, he was responding to Exist, my old Swedish chum, saying, why do the TOs decide what tournaments qualify should be counted for VRS or not? And he put it out there to Blast and HLTV and the official Counter-Strike Twitter account. Why do the TOs get to decide what qualifiers should be counted for VRS or not? And then Snappy said, yeah, actually, tell them Exist. It is borderline impossible to grind rank. Counter-Strike, you fully closed down the entire system, and you were killing organizations not already top 30. We went through 6 open qualifier games versus multiple paid teams. How is anyone supposed to get up when almost nothing is ranked? And, you know, he's got a point. It is hard if you're if you have aspirations of climbing the VRS ranking points, but the only tournaments open and available to you are ones that don't have points. And just to show you what he's talking about, these are the events that they have been participating in. You can see CCTs and the RES Showdown closed qualifier where they played 8 maps. And you can see who they're in there with, you know? Bet Boom, Metasport, these are the Tier 2 kind of stalwarts, again, on that cusp, that Tier 1.5. And so they're all in the same boat. They're all in the same problem. Now, couple of things, right? And it's my old friend Schadenfreude, right? Mr. fucking Schadenfreude is back. First of all, Snappy used to complain about the partnered system, which Ents were essentially accommodated for. Back when he was complaining about it, he was on Ents. It was pre-Falcons. And obviously on Falcons, they found excuses to invite Falcons to all the events. I wonder why. Got to be careful about what you wish for, homie. And it's like, listen, brother, best will in the world. The partnered league system stank, and you definitely were frozen out, and it sucked. But then you went and got that big bag of money from Falcons, and now you're on a shit team, and everything's changed. So, you know, it's kind of just a partnered system all over again for you. So, yeah. Whatever. But also, I'll just add, you're on NIP now. So, fuck you. Like, not you. Not Snappy. But you are on NIP. So, if NIP never went to a Tier 1 tournament ever again, that would be what I call justice for all the fuckery they've engaged in. So, very hard for me to get on board with that critique. Even though I agree. And look, Valve do need to address this. Obviously, they've got to take a look at it and be like, there has to be a mechanism through which teams that want to earn points and get invited to VRS tournaments, there has to be a mechanism through which they can do it. They can't just be frozen out by virtue of, well, it's invite only, and we invite based on VRS points, and you don't have any VRS points. And you go, well, can we earn some VRS points? Yeah, you play in VRS tournaments, but they're invite only. Yeah, that's right, yeah. We do have qualifiers for some of them. Oh, okay. What if I don't qualify? Then you earn no points. Oh, okay, cool. So, I don't know, you know, maybe that's the way it should be. Maybe that's the sport functioning as intended. But I will say this: you can't just be giving out points willy-nilly, or it makes a mockery of the ranking system in the first place. Then we had this. There was the Blast Open qualifiers, and obviously one of the beneficiaries of the VRS as it stands at the moment has been Imperial Female. Now, I've said in the past, I don't really care that female teams are getting invites predicated on the fact that they have earned a lot of prize money by only playing against women's teams, and the prize money is what's essentially bumping them up in the world rankings when we know they're probably not in the top 32 teams in the world. I've said I don't really care. I think it's good for the sport. It creates interest, gives them experience. It's probably inadvertently done more for co-ed competition by accident than anything we'd ever done done deliberately. That said, if we're going to fix the VRS, we have to fix everything, right? And so, sorry, you can't say on the one side, you can't exclude anyone for any reason from your tournament, so that means you lose the VRS points. Now, over here, the women's team, they get to fucking have the prize money count from the women's only league. You can't do it. It makes no sense. You have to fix that. And by the way, it is generating a lot of ill will right now. I've seen the change because when Imperial Female first got invited, everyone went, shut up, you fucking incels. Calm down, chuds. Who cares? Let them play. And then they played well. They played well against Na'Vi. You know, they had some good moments, right? And people were like, yeah, that was one of the most watched games of CS this year so far. Imperial Female versus Na'Vi. It was really good for the sport. Now, they did this, you see. They forfeited this RES Showdown qualifier. And people were like, but why? Why would they do that? And then you realize that if you're already getting invited by the VRS, it's better to not play and lose. And forfeits don't count as losses. So if you're already getting invites, you just forfeit out of the qualifiers. You forfeit out of other tournaments and qualifiers, and then it won't tank your overall ranking. And I was like, that can't be right. But it was backed up by Messioso, so it must be true, right? I was like, that sounds mental. But Messioso said so in this Reddit thread. Forfeits don't count as losses in VRS. And someone said, can you help me find where this is stated in the rules? If it is not explicitly stated, I don't see why a forfeit loss should not be a loss. And Messioso says, the reason is the matches are simply not completed, so their data doesn't get processed by the algorithm. So that, again, seems a massive oversight, because a forfeit loss is a loss. It's right there in the name. And so this obviously has upset the chuds who are like, well, they're cheesing the system. Women, they can't get invited on their own merit, can't win games against men. So this is what they have to resort to. I hate them now. I cheered when Anna did that deagle. I did. But now I hate them. And that's what those comments are in that thread. And Imperial came out and they explained what it was. They explained why they did it. Because they didn't want people to think they were trying to cheese the system. I'm not saying they are trying to cheese the system, but a byproduct of their actions is it cheeses the system. So, and they said here, well, here's why we gave up on qualifying for Blast Rising. The team chose not to play selectively for the event it was which event it was invited for before the start of the dispute. The European qualification for Blast Rising Spring was another championship to which the Imperial female team was invited via Valve regional standings. The team, however, did not compete in the qualifier because they gave up hours before the start. In contact with a Dust2 Brazil representative, the organisation explained the withdrawal, which generated criticism in the European community. We will never understand. Until we tried to fit in the participation to qualify, but due to incompatibility of the player's schedule, it was not possible to play, Imperial said. The organisation, however, did not explain whether it refused the actual invitation or just giving up playing in the qualifiers. And then it talks about the criticism. You can see there's some tweets like, this doesn't look good, blah, blah. I'd respect them if they were fighting for a place, but dropping out's not good, blah, blah. Another one here. What is this nonsense that Imperial female withdraws on the same day when the tournament starts and another team in line lose their chance to get VRS points? They don't want to lose points, but it's unfair. The teams get fucked because of it. Shameful, blah, blah, blah. That's the other aspect of it. By not competing, you know, obviously the other team doesn't get the win, and so they get one less win that would have counted towards their points. So, obviously, that's bad, and that needs to be fixed. I'd say look at that. I'd say it's crazy that you couldn't foresee that not having forfeit losses count towards ranking decay would be a bad thing. Maybe ranking decay is the answer. Maybe it needs to have an insane level of ranking decay like you do in Premier or something. Maybe that's what has to happen, that you have to constantly be active and constantly be winning. But then you've got the problem of creating pressure to constantly be in qualifiers, in tournaments, always playing, which is going to lead to more burnout. It's going to lead to more issues with players. It seems wild. Anyway, we got an update on the 3rd, and it was basically telling you how the invites are going to work for the following tournaments. You can see no major changes. Things are essentially going ahead 12 spots by the global VRS, 16 by the region. For Bucharest, 12 and 24. Yala Compass, 6 and 12. IEM Melbourne, 2 from Europe, 2 from Americas, 2 from Asia, 10 from the global, etc., etc. And this is just how it's going to work moving forward. But ultimately, they have to tweak these systems probably after Austin. You know, they're going to be doing the Premier update anyway after the major. We're now having seasons in line with a competitive season. It makes sense that we should be tweaking VRS things in line with that as well, because this is untenable. What you've essentially created, especially when we consider what I was talking about at the start of the stream, with certain orgs feeling comfortable clandestinely having agreements to not go to certain tournament operators' tournaments, you are ultimately creating a self-perpetuating system where there are a number of teams that are going to be at every tournament, except the ones they choose not to attend, and we're going to get a lot of stagnancy in terms of matchups at these tournaments, because it is going to be the same teams invited over and over again, which I don't hate, because success should be rewarded, but success is also relative, and smaller teams definitely have to have a mechanism through which to get into the leagues. Indeed, what's funny about all of this, and I guess this is the final point for this segment, is Valve ultimately shut down the partnered leagues, and one of the things they explicitly said when they did that was because you're freezing out lesser teams, and teams, smaller teams, regardless of their finances, should be able to participate in the best tournaments. And then they've created a system that inadvertently, without their foresight or knowledge, has ultimately shut down the ability for those smaller teams to do that. Not to mention the problem with the female teams and how that's played out, which it's a good thing that the women's teams are going there, but again, you've got to shut down this preference that you have for the prize money. That's got to go, particularly at a time when prize pools are going to be inflated as everyone does the big dick measuring contests across 25 and 26. And there are obvious easy fixes here, and there are some not so obvious easy fixes here, that this is the burden that you take on when you run a league like this, when you run a world championship ranking system, when you essentially dictate control of your esport. Now, all of that being said, I don't want Valve to fucking run away, run a mile, outsource it to ESL or HLTV or PGL or anyone else. I want them to stay actively engaged. And I also think the VRS is going to be a good thing. I know people like you in the chat, Papa Brun 123. I know some people are like, well, you saw what they did with the DPC. The DPC was nominally a good idea and a good thing for Dota. It came unstuck and came off the rails due to a lack of attention. And the DPC could have been a great thing. It just ended up not being it. But Dota and CS are not the same thing. And the teams that work on them don't think in the same way. And so if you remember the good old days of the DPC started strong. It just became a pathetic shadow of itself. But for me, VRS is still the answer. Otherwise, as we've seen, tournament operators are just going to get greedy and just monopolize the scene again. The VRS is the mechanism for oversight. The VRS is the mechanism for fairness. The VRS is the mechanism, ultimately, that if you are a team, you will get your invites irrespective of who plays for you, who owns you. You don't have to lick ESL's arse to be guaranteed to go. They have to invite you. It's in the rules. That is a protectorate that you should be grateful for, because not a lot of esports have that. And so ultimately, we need to fix the VRS. We don't need to break it apart, smash it, have a do-over. It just needs some tweaks. And we're going to get there. I think Valve have proven, they've certainly shown enough to me that I can say they give a shit. They give a shit about the esports, and they're going to continue to pay attention, tweak, move things forward, and improve. And that's brilliant. That's all I could ever ask for from Valve. It's what they've historically never done. They've always just, let's put this in the Petri dish and see what grows. Oh, look, everyone's dead. Wasn't that funny? Okay, next experiment. I don't want them to do that anymore. I want them to stay involved with CS, move us forward, and ultimately act as the referee from all the fucking stupid, warring factions and morons that have ultimately nearly killed CS on multiple occasions. I mean, we've been so close, guys. Like, obviously, there's that stream from, like, 2020 that everyone quotes. Who said, didn't you say CS was dead? I was like, yeah, I did say, I think I lived long enough to see competitive CS kill itself. Like, match fixing was rife. There was no oversight. Partnered leagues had just come in. Fucking, the game, like, people were walking away from the game. Player numbers were down. It looked pretty fucking bleak for a time, guys, you know? So, ultimately, let's not overreact. I know we don't do a great job of that, and I've shown you some of the things I would characterize as overreactions. Let's just wait and see. I believe Valve will absolutely get this right in time.